name is Dusty. This happened to me during my college years. Back then, I didn't have much of a social life. Me and my best friend James usually spent our weekends hanging out and playing online video games. We did this traditionally throughout high school, and now into college when we weren't too busy with our curriculum. Until one day, my buddy James decided to get himself a girlfriend and wanted me to go out on a double date with him. His girlfriend Melissa had a friend whom she wanted me to meet and perhaps start dating. I wasn't too big on the idea because this would be the second time, the first being an utter disaster due to the fact we had absolutely nothing at all in common. But this time Melissa assured me that Susan, that's her name, would be a much better match. I just assumed she would be a total nerd with no life. Come to find out to the contrary, she was wonderful. Not only very pretty, but much more down to earth than the other one. So I spent the whole time we had dinner together, thinking what I could do to impress her. I wanted this to work out. Melissa could sense this too, I imagine, since she insisted after dinner we all go over to her apartment and have some drinks. I wasn't much of a drinker, but at the time it sounded like a great idea. Susan thought so too, so we all headed over to Melissa's house. The night was going great. We played a couple rounds of Trivial Pursuit and had a few beers. After a while, James was getting bored with the game and suggested we play something else. We were all in agreement, so we went to the closet to see what else Melissa had. That's when I spotted it on the floor under a bunch of other board games, a Ouija board. I immediately picked it up and said this would be fun. Normally, I would never want to play something like this due to its reputation and my religious upbringing, but I had enough beers in me by this point that all I wanted to do was impress Susan. She smiled and said, "Why not? It could be fun." So now that we were all in agreement, we set it up on the living room floor and dimmed all the lights to set the right ambiance. We all sat there for a minute, not sure what to do, when Melissa spoke up and said, "Go ahead and ask it a question, Dusty." I laughed and said I had no idea what to ask. That's when James, being the clown that he is, told us all to put our hands on it, which we did, and asked if me and Susan would be going on a second date. Of course, I laughed out loud awkwardly, and Susan started to blush, when almost in an instant, we started to move the planchette in unison towards the upper right-hand corner of the board. It landed on no. James laughed and said I needed to step up my game. Susan blushed again, and I just kind of laughed it off. "Okay, man, you had your fun. What else should we ask it now?" I asked, trying to change the subject. Susan, who was clearly embarrassed too, suggested we might try and contact someone from beyond. Hiding behind a smile, I gulped and thought to myself, here we go. Things are about to become interesting for sure. I took a big sip of my freshly poured mixed drink and said that's a great idea. That's when Melissa spoke up and said maybe we try and communicate with one of her neighbors. He had recently passed away a few apartments down from her. His name was Jerry, and he lived alone. He apparently died of heart failure a few months back. Melissa, at this point appearing quite tipsy, raised her voice and said, "Hello, Jerry. Are you with us?" bursting out in laughter. I just sighed and shook my head. She then said, Okay, I'll be serious." She then grabbed my hand and told us all to grab each other's hands. I took hold of Susan's and smiled at her. Then Melissa asked again, this time more seriously, if Jerry was here. We all placed our hands on the planchette and waited. Nothing happened. She then told us to close our eyes, which we did. Again, she asked if Jerry would give us a sign that he is here. We waited again. Finally, our hands started to move together. First to yes, then it spelled out, "I am here." The whole time this was happening, we all had opened our eyes and were staring at each other very closely to see who might actually be moving it. When it was done, we all sort of sat there a little freaked out. Susan said maybe we shouldn't go any further. She was starting to get a bad feeling about this. I did agree with her, but at the same time I was intrigued. James spoke up and said, "Nah, let's keep going. I want to know what Jerry has to say," chuckling. "Okay," we all said hesitantly, and placed our hands on the planchette once more. "Jerry, now that we know you were with us," Melissa said, "is there anything you want to tell us from the other side?" Almost instantly, the planchette began to violently jerk from one letter to the next. It spelled out G, then O, and then T. O. "Go to," I said out loud. Then to H, then to E, then to L. Melissa stood up completely freaked out. "What is going on, guys? Which one of you is doing this?" Before she could even finish her sentence, both of her smoke detectors began to go off in her apartment simultaneously. At this point, we were all standing up and scared shitless. James kicked the Ouija board across the room. I went and took the batteries out of the smoke detectors and put them on the kitchen table. We just stood there in silence, staring back and forth at each other, totally freaked out. I finally broke the silence and said, "What the heck just happened, you guys? I don't think that was Jerry." And then all at once, every light that was on in the apartment went dead. And once again the smoke detectors started to go off, only this time without their batteries in them. We all scrambled towards the front door in a wild frenzy. We were probably halfway down the block before I stopped, trying to catch my breath. I invited James and Melissa to stay over at my place for the night. Susan went home immediately. That was the most frightened I've ever been in my life. Me and Susan never stayed in contact after that. I can't say I really blame her. James and Melissa ended up moving shortly after that. It's safe to say none of us ever messed with the Ouija board again.